Would you be able to bring in the presenter screen? Thank you. Yeah, so thank you everyone for taking time to attend the Mulesoft meetup, which is happening from Chicago region. I'm Prosenjit. I'm a customer success technical architect with Mulesoft. I'm with Mulesoft for close to 2 years now. I have my colleague today, Lakshmi, who is on my team, and we are going to talk about the MUnit Test Recorder today. Mulesoft Meetup Chicago has come a long way. We used to meet on in person in pre-COVID times, and now since the COVID has started around March, we have gone online, and we were one of the first meetup groups that actually went virtual, apart from the virtual meetup, which was a dedicated meetup for virtual to be on the virtual platform. We were one of the first regional groups that went virtual, and since then we have done 6 virtual Mulesoft meetups from the Chicago region, and now a lot of other regions are actually have gone virtual, and they're all doing Mulesoft meetups. So it's great. It's a good platform for developers to interact and communicate and ask questions. And also you can suggest new topics, and you can, if you are willing to present, you are more than welcome. Reach out to me directly, and I will be able to schedule that and work with you to set up the Mulesoft meetup for that. So without further ado, I would hand it over to Lakshmi. So Lakshmi, if you can briefly introduce yourself and then go over with the topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Prasenjit. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this virtual meetup. So my name is Lakshmi Narayan. I'm part of the customer success strategy and architecture team at Mulesoft. I work with Prasenjit. We work with customers across Northern America and Canada, and we work with customers to give them technical guidance, strategic, and help them with their roadblocks, help them with their implementations, give them ideas on best practices on using the platform, and we work with various customers on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for this opportunity. This is I wanted to talk about the MUnit Test Recorder, which is a cool feature and which helps in automating your MUnit test case creation. We've heard from customers that creating MUnit test cases was not that easy, and they had to do a lot of manual effort. So the product team had come up with this test recorder option, which I can say automates around at least 70 to 80% of your test case creation. And it is a great starting point for you, and you can then add your configurations to the test recorder in case of complex scenarios. But it's a very good starting point, and it completely automates the test creation process. I will show you a demo of, I have a Mule application. I'll show you how to, what are the features, what are the configurations that can be done in the test recorder. All right, so I just wanted to start off with just high level, quickly. We all know the importance of testing. We have to make sure that the code is of high quality, is performant and reliable before we deploy to production. So we need to ensure that our flows pre-go live, all the flows work separately and together, and make sure that it has been tested properly, so that post-go live, they perform properly, they are sized properly. So some of the main testing stages that in specific with Mule applications are unit testing, integration testing, and performance testing. And we are more concerned with unit testing because that is where MUnit test cases play a pivotal role. So unit testing is like, it's like a white box testing where the users know and understand the internal workings of the application and want to ensure that the internal logic works as expected. So we are concerned in unit testing. Our main concern is testing every individual component in our flows. So the smallest testable part, which can be a flow or a subflow, has to be tested. And we are not concerned about, we should not let the external dependencies affect our test cases. For example, if we are making a HTTP call to an external API, or if we are connecting to a database using connector, we should not let those external third-party systems affect our test cases execution. So unit test case is strictly testing the logic within your flows and subflows, and we have to ensure that we have test cases created for every smallest testable component in our Mule application. So that is where MUnit plays a pivotal role. If you see, MUnit is Mulesoft's application testing framework. It is catered to test Mule flows easily because it uses the embedded Mule runtime. It is very similar to developing Mule applications, and it is fully integrated with Anypoint Studio, and it is integrated with Maven, which is a great feature because in your CI/CD process, it is extremely easy to trigger off these unit test cases. And it is very important, right? As in when you check in your code, you should have these automated test cases that are triggered and executed. And based on the result, you must then, you can have configurations to decide if you want to go ahead and deploy to other environments, or if you want to fail the build. So it is fully integrated with Maven. It provides reports that are compatible with Surefire, with SonarQube. So it is very useful in that. And it provides the ability to mock out all those external dependencies that I spoke about. So we'll see all of that, why it is important. So the general structure of an MUnit test case, you will have three main sections in the MUnit test case. First one is the behavior. And this is where you set all the preconditions. For example, you want to set the input for your flows. You want to mock your external dependencies that I spoke about. You want to spy on any transformations you do. You want to spy on the payload before and after a particular event processor has been executed. All those go in this section, in the behavior section. In the validation section, you would be doing all the assertions. So you have to assert that the value of the Mule event is a particular value, right? So all those assertions will go in here. You want to verify that a particular event processor was called a certain number of times. All those assertions and verifications go into the validation section. And in the execution phase, it's where you will be invoking the flows that have to be tested. So you'll have all the flow references. So the main tools that you'll be using in your test cases primarily are mock, assertions, spy, and verify call. So mock, like I told you, it allows you to mock any processor and return a predefined result instead of executing the processor itself. So if you have external dependencies, it is a very good practice to not let them affect your unit test cases. So if you have a database call or a HTTP call or a Salesforce connector, if you're using all that, you can mock their responses, and they will be, you can have the mocked data in separate data weave files, and so that you can then use them in your test case where you can read those data weave files and do the mocking. You can mock them as the response for your for the call instead of calling the external third-party system. So we'll look at it. I'll show you in the demo how we can do that. Assertions, like I said, it allows you to run assertions to validate the state of a Mule's event. There are three ways of doing assertions. You have assert that, which uses a set of inbuilt data weave functions. We call it MUnit matchers. So there are the inbuilt data weave functions for doing string comparisons, for doing greater than, less than, for iterating through a map. There are various inbuilt functions that can be used in the assertion function. So you can use that in the assert that tool. So another better way to do this is to externalize your assertions in a data weave file and then read that using an assert expression. So the first one I spoke was assert that. The second one is assert expression, where you can read the assertion functions that you have defined in a data weave file, and you can load those using a read URL function, and then you can you can maintain all your. It improves code readability as well. You can maintain all your assertions in a separate DataV file or a DataV module. You can then define variables inside that DataV file, and substitute all the mocked data that you want to use in your assertion. And spy is basically, like I said, it is mainly used to spy the state of the mule event before and after an event is processor is processed. So like I said, if you're doing a complex transformation and you want to verify that what is the payload before the transformation and after the transformation, you can use a spy. Another very good use case for spy is if you're making a HTTP call, right, to an external API, you can add a spy to verify that all the request parameters required for the HTTP call are properly set. So you can add a spy just before the HTTP call is made to validate that the HTTP request is formed properly. The attributes, the payload, everything is properly formed before making the call. So spy, that is another area where spy can be used. And verify call is mainly to check if your processor was called the required number of times, or if it was actually called or not. So for example, if you have a bug in your code and you have some sort of an infinite loop, you don't want it to go, you want to catch that, right? So if you specify that the processor has to be called only for this certain number of times, you can catch that bug. Similarly, if you have a scheduler and you want to ensure that the scheduler has invoked your flow, you can have a verify call in your test case to ensure that that was called. So it basically checks that the flow was called for the number of times that you have specified. So this is just how it looks. I'll show you in the demo. So this is the mock where you can mock out your external dependencies. Verify call, like I told you, you can specify at the number of times, or at least, or at most. You have options. And this is the spy processor, which lets you spy on the event processors. This is what I told you, 3 types of doing assertions. Assert that uses inbuilt DataV functions. Assert expression actually evaluates the DataV expression, so you can have the assertions in a DataV file, external DataV file, and then use it, read those files in your assert expression. In fact, the test recorder will automatically generate these assert expressions and the DataV files. I'll show you that. So that's a good, it improves code readability. And assert equals is basically just to do basic assertions, just to check if the payload is equal to a certain value or not. These are the inbuilt DataV functions that I spoke about. You have those string comparisons. You can iterate through maps, and you can do greater than, less than comparisons. You have a lot of MUnit matches that you can use in your assert that. This is an important point. It is don't forget to create your negative test cases. So we should not be doing just positive testing. We should be able to check that in case of an error, we would have done error handling, right? So we need to ensure that we are gracefully handling the error and returning a proper response to the end user. So we have to create test cases, negative test cases for those scenarios, and ensure they are tested as well. In fact, in the demo, I'll show you how we can create a negative test scenario as well, where we can induce the error in using the mock. We can induce the error and then ensure that the proper error handling logic is executed and the proper error response is being returned. All right. So before I get into the demo, so we have 3 trivia questions. So I think the first trivia question will be coming up. So Prasenjit, shall I go ahead? Will you be noting down I have the answer as well. So is it a good time to start?
So the first of all, let me just confirm some of the ground rules on the trivia. The first of all thing is please put your answer on the chat. So we will, and I know that there will be a lot of answers. So it's important that the first correct answer from the respective folks will be awarded the trivia. And there will be 3 questions. So we'll make sure that we baseline it out, and so please be ready when we are starting on with the questions. So Lakshmi, are you ready?
Yeah, I have the first question coming up. The other two will be after the demo.
No,
It's
that's
just
right.
the first question.
Yeah. So folks, please be ready to prepare to respond on the chat message. And here you go with the first question.
Okay, here we go. Which MUnit tool can be used to verify the data passed to the mock, to verify the data that is passed to the mock of an external dependency?
Okay, we have a few response. Um, can
Do you want me to go ahead with the answer?
Yeah, I think we have quite a few responses. Let's go with the answer.
Okay. The answer is CSpy. Like I just told, if you're making a call to an HTTP call, you can use the spy component to verify that the data, the HTTP request that is formed is the right data. So the answer is spy.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead with the rest of the present.
Okay, sure. All right, so let's get into. So that was a brief introduction what all the tools and the structure of our MUnit test cases. So let's get into the test recorder feature. This is a feature that has been introduced as part of Mule Studio version 7.5 and runtime version 4.3. So it's a really cool feature. So let me show you how to create using the test recorder. Let's look at the demo. Prasenjit, you're able to see my studio, right? Just to confirm. Prasenjit?
Yeah, are you not able to hear me? Yeah, I said yes.
No. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I also see Sujata also confirming this on the chat that we can see your screen. So yeah, I think everybody can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So let's look at this. I have a simple Mule application. It has a HTTP listener as the source. It receives an account ID as a URI parameter. The first flow that I call, I use the account ID to call the database. So I'm doing a select from the database for that account ID, and I'm getting the response. And the second flow, I'm using the data that I got from the database to create a record in Salesforce. So that's the application we have. Now, let's go about using the test recorder to create test cases for this Mule application. One of the first things that you'll have to do is configure MUnit Maven support. Like I told you, it has inbuilt Maven support. So once you configure this, I've already done it. You will see in the pom.xml the dependencies that are required for the MUnit test cases to be run will be added. So if you look here, you will have the MUnit runner dependency and the MUnit tools dependencies added. So once this is added, you will be able to see the modules, the MUnit modules, and you will be able to add them, use the MUnit tools as needed. So your dependencies will be added. And also an important section, bear in mind, is this MUnit Maven plugin section. You can do a lot of configurations in this section. So especially when you're triggering your test cases from the CI/CD process, you have a lot of options here. For example, you can specify the code coverage percentage over here, like your application code coverage, your resource code coverage, your flow code coverage. You can specify the percentage here, and you can fail your build if those percentage is not met. You can also you can specify the format of your reports, your MUnit test reports, what format they have to be. You can specify that here. So there are 4 formats like HTML, console, JSON, and recently sub compatibility for SonarQube was also released. So you can specify those formats here so that all those reports are generated in the respective formats. And you have, so this is a very important section. There are much more things you can do. You can specify flows that need to be ignored over here. You can specify, you can redirect the test output to a file if you want it to be redirected to a specific location. So all this configuration will be over here. So this is an important section, especially this all applies when you trigger your unit test cases from your CI/CD pipeline using Maven commands. So getting back to our application. So once we have configured MUnit test support, so let's take this. So our goal here is to create test cases for every single flow that we have, right? So if you look at this flow, we have a database select. We are fetching data from the database, and we're doing a transformation, and we're logging. So if I want to generate a test case, what will I do? Usually you would have created a blank test for this flow, which would have created a blank test suite. And then you will go about configuring the various tools that MUnit provides to start configuring the test case. But in this scenario, we have this option called record test for this flow. So all you need to do is when you click on record test for this flow, it launches the embedded Mule runtime. Now you should see a pop-up coming up. Okay, so there you go. So what this means is the test record is up and running, and now it is waiting for real data so that it can capture that data, real data, and it can then record the entire execution of the flow. So what we need to do now is trigger the flow. So you can use either Postman or whatever. And now that I've triggered for, you see it starts recording, and it has recorded the entire execution of the application. So it has captured all the backend flow execution, and now we can go ahead and start configuring the test. So bear in mind, we are doing this for the second flow, which selects the data from the database. So we have the test suite name here. So this is the test suite where all your test cases will be present. And this is the test name for the second flow, the flow which receives data from the database. So next, if you see here, it has already captured the flow input. So I had passed the URI parameter, right? So if you check here, I had passed the URI parameter account ID as 30. It captures that. And in the first flow, I had actually set it to a variable. So even that, so when it comes to the second flow, that variable is already set, and the entire flow is executed, and it has retrieved the data details for account ID 30 from the database. So it has captured the entire flow execution, and now, like I said, it is important for us to mock out those external dependencies, right? So I don't want to. If the database is down, I don't want my unit test case to fail. I don't want it to affect my unit test case. So what I will do, I need to mock that processor. So instead of manually configuring as you would have done without this test recorder, you create a mock, you add the processor that needs to mock, you add those configuration. All you need to do is select mock this processor. It has already the data that is the mocked data. It already has it. So now it will generate the data. So if you see here, if you click on next, you will see a summary of what you will see in your test case. So this is just a simple this thing. So if you click on finish, there you go. This is a simple creation. So it has already created the mock for the database select. So you don't have to do all these configurations manually. And look here, it's this is the great part. It has already created data-v files that you can see under source test resources. It creates a folder specific for this test case. And inside that folder, it has created all those data-v files that hold all those data that is required by these various MUnit components. So if you see here, the mock reads the data, which is available in the mock payload. So if you see here, it has the database select response has been captured, and it is placed. It has already captured it into a separate data file. Similarly, if you look at the set input, it reads the set event payload. So if you go to set event payload, in this case, remember, I didn't pass any request payload, right? When I hit the service, I passed only the URI parameter. So URI parameters are usually present in the attribute. So it creates a separate file for the attribute, and you can see the URI parameters, account ID also present over here. So it has captured all of those data and set them as separate data v files. And there you go. And you don't even have to have, I mean, a person without MUnit knowledge could have done this, right? I mean, how it works. It basically, that's all it does. Now I want to create more. I want to do mocks. I want to do spies. I want to do verify call. So let me go to the main flow, and let me also create a test case for that as well. So once again, I do record test for this flow. It again launches the embedded Mule runtime. Okay, so now again I trigger my flow. It starts recording the entire flow execution, and now I can configure my test. So it's the same suite name, but it's the test case for the first flow. So it's the main flow, right? So it's a test case for the main flow. And now so I said I want to do a spy, right? So there's the transform message. So I want to spy this processor. Before that, let me just show you this. If you go here, you can see in the flow input, I don't need the payload, right? Because I'm not using the payload that is, I'm not passing any payload, so I don't need the payload. So you have this option. I just need the attributes which has the URI parameter. So you can specify this option. So going back to transform, I want to do a spy. So it has already captured the payload before the transform message and after the transform message. It has captured all of that. And let me also do a verify call. So I want to verify that this flow, which retrieves the data details from the database, is called only once. So I've added a verify call as well. And similarly, you can also you can mock even flow references. So not just external dependencies, but you can mock flow references as well. So I'll mock this processor, which this thing updates data Salesforce. So now if you see, you have a complete summary of what all you'll see in your test cases. And when you click on finish, that's it. This, if you had done manually, you have to individually set up everything. But look how easy this is. This automatically creates a separate folder like previously for this test case. It has already, so if you look at the spy, it has created the spy for the transfer message that we wanted and the assertions within the spy. So you are spying on the component, and you are verifying that the payload before and after is to a certain value, right? You're comparing it to a value, the payload to a value, right? So it has already created that assertions, the assert expression for that, and it will be using these data files for doing that assertions. So payload must be equal to this. It has already captured all of that. Similarly, the verify call as well. It will do the check that it was called only once. So this is how easy it is to create. So I mean, the set event input would have also taken. I removed the payload, so you don't see it here. But the attributes, which will have the URI parameter, will be read from that. So this is how simple it is to create a test case. So now I had told you about the negative test case, right? How important it is to create negative test cases. So if you look here in our Salesforce call, right, where we retrieve the details from the database and we create the record in Salesforce. So we have an on error continue. We are doing error handling where if we have Salesforce connectivity issue, we want to catch that, and we want to set a specific custom error message. So if I want to create a test this thing for this test case for this, right? How will I do it? Now, bear in mind, the test recorder doesn't give you an out-of-box feature of creating negative test cases, but you will have to. But it is with simple configuration we can do it. So let me show you how we can do that. So I record test again for this flow, the third flow. Okay, so I'm going to trigger the flow again. Okay, so I'm going to, like I told you, you can use the mock feature to mock the error. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to mock the error. So take the Salesforce creation processor. So I'm going to mock this processor, and then once I create the test case, what I can do. So you see here, you have the mock, but this is the happy path mocking. So you have mocked the actual Salesforce response that you'll get from Salesforce. So if you see here, you have the payload, which is read from that folder, the new folder that has been created, and you have you do the mocking. Now, if I want to induce the error, so what I can do is this is the error type that I want to induce. So I will remove the positive scenario. And you have this option error where you can induce the error over here. So this will actually this is like a negative scenario. It is inducing the error, and now you have to check that the error message that is set is the custom error message, right? So for that, let me show you how I'll do that. So like I told you, right, in assertion we have three options. You can do assert that, assert expression. So everywhere we have assert expression. So what we can do, I'll do an assert that over here. So if you go to MUnit tools, you have the assert that option where you can, now I need to check that the error has been mocked. So the flow has been executed. I need to check that it went into the error handling logic and the custom error message has been set. So for that, the payload, I'm just going to check that the payload, and this is where I'll be using those MUnit matchers. So that inbuilt data v functions, right, that I said. So if you do control space, you'll get those data v functions, list of data v functions, and I'll just do a string comparison. So the string that I need to compare with is Salesforce this custom error message. That's it. Now I've created a negative test case as well. So I'm mocking this. If you see here, I'm mocking the error, and I'm just asserting using assert that instead of assert expression that it should be equal to this particular custom error message. So you see here, for a Mule application that does a database call, that does a Salesforce call, does some transformation, I was able to create test cases, individual test cases for the flows, and eventually for the entire application within like 10 minutes, right? 10, 15 minutes. So it greatly simplifies, the test recorder greatly simplifies your test creation process. It automates at least 80% of the work. It's a great starting point. So, and then if you want to do more, configurations like this, if you want to do advanced, like there are some, bear in mind the test recorder is still evolving. The product is, this is the first this thing. So the product is going to keep adding features to it. So it has certain limitations, like for a for each, if you want to, if you have a for each processor, and if you want to dynamically pass data for each iteration, you cannot do that with test recorder. You will have to do some configuration in your mock to or use this option then call, where you can specify a flow, and then depending on the for loop counter, you can pass dynamic data. So certain complex scenarios like that, if you want parallel processing, if you want to test parallel processing, all that you cannot use the test recorder. But at least 80% of the work will be done on the test recorder. So that is what I wanted to show you. So it greatly simplifies your test case creation process. And now let me just go ahead and run this suite, which will run all the test cases. So there you go. So all the 3 test cases were successful. And now it has also generated, you can also look at the report that is generated. So you have the code coverage report. So here you see 91%. That is because you see all these components were tested, but since we had created only negative test case for this flow, that's why you see 91%. Well, that's how simple it is. And you can then trigger it from Maven. Let me show you that as well. It's very simple. So if you go to your project folder and if you do a Maven, sorry, yep.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. One quick question here from Mandy. He's saying that we have this on error continue and on error propagate. So what happens in that context to a text case?
So when you, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when you use on error propagate, your error message will be propagated. So what you can do in that case is use this feature. So if you go to a flow, you have this expected error type specification here. So if you're expecting any error messages like, runtime error messages, anything like if you're trying to, a runtime exception, like when you're trying to access the object store, if you expect some error to happen, if the key is null, or any runtime exception, this will list out all the exceptions that can occur in your Mule application depending on the processes that you've used. And you can actually, if you can specify it here, so that this is also another way of testing the error scenarios when you propagate the error. So that if you want the error to be propagated, you want to ensure that you're expecting this particular error from that test case, you can specify those over here. So you have this option, or in my case, if you've done on error continue and you're catching the error and setting a custom message and you want to test that custom message has been set, you can do it the way I've done it.
Mandy, does that answer your question?
I can't see Prasenjit, so I'm relying on you.
Yeah, so I see what he's asking is what about on error continue? So yeah, I think Lakshmi mentioned that in on error continue, you can see that you can already choose from the list of error types, and you can provide a custom message with that.
Yeah, and that's what I did, right? I caught the exception in on error continue and I set a custom message. And then I use the mock to ensure that exception is induced and that particular custom error message has been set. So I verified that using this assertion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I think let's proceed.
Yeah. So you can also trigger the test cases from Maven commands. So from your CICD server, once your code has been checked in, it's pretty simple. I'm just in the project folder and I'm triggering the test cases. So this is where that configurations that we gave, right? It's very important. So if you look at this, I have given console. So that's why I'll be able to see once the test cases have been executed, I'll be able to see the coverage report and the test result execution. But you can do a lot more configurations over here. You can set the code coverage percentage, the application flow level, resource level code coverage percentage. You can fail your build if it's not to a specific percentage. Always target at least 75 to 80% code coverage. So you can specify all of that. And you can also, let me show you something else. Let this finish. So it has executed all the test cases. You see the coverage report, the same thing, 91%, and all the 3 cases were successful. Now, if you want to, if you look here in your test cases, you have options like you can ignore test. So this is when you run it from the studio. But if you want to run a particular, ignore a particular test from Maven, right? You can specify it in the configuration section, the form.xml, and then you can specify ignore flows, and that flows will not be executed. Similarly, if you want to categorize your test cases, right? If you want to have a set of positive cases or negative cases, you can add tags to it. So you can add tags to your test cases and then pass that tag in the Maven command so that only those set of test cases are executed when you're triggering your test cases. So you can do that. You can, like I said, you can ignore test, and then if your test cases uses, if it makes HTTP call, or if it requires a scheduler, right? In those cases, you have to enable this flow sources, so that you have to list the flow that actually contains that scheduler or the HTTP listener, because MUnit by default won't be able to start those listeners. So you have to specify the flows over here, which has those components, so that MUnit will be able to understand where to initialize those HTTP listeners or the scheduler, for example. So there are a lot of options like this. And like I said, in this configuration, you can recently I had a customer they were using SonarQube for static code analysis, and the MUnit test report was not compatible with SonarQube. So recently our product team with MUnit version 2.3, and if I'm not wrong, all you need to do is specify the format as sonar, and and I have another tag which says sonar coverage. It will produce a report. In fact, let me show you. So I ran the test, right? So if you look at the target folder, you will have all the MUnit reports generated. So this will have all the reports. So if you see Surefire reports, if I had specified sonar, I will have another folder called sonar-reports, which will have the reports with the format compatible with SonarQube. So you can specify all of those configurations over here. So, I think I've covered everything. So you can specify the code coverage. You can fail your build if your code coverage is not to a certain percentage. That's about it. So you can, if you see within 15 minutes, for a Mule application that involved database calls, Salesforce calls, I was able to generate test cases quickly with minimal configurations. So I would highly recommend, and this should be part of your CI/CD process, right? Automated unit test cases. Every time you check in code, you should be executing those test cases, and depending on the result, you should either fail your build or then decide to proceed with deployment to higher regions.
Thank you, Lakshmi. So can we go with the trivia questions, and then if we have some time remaining, maybe we can take some questions if there is questions that are there. So I think so first of all, let's get through with the trivia part. If you don't have anything else to share.
Yeah, I think I've covered everything. So let's get to the trivia question.
Yeah.
So
before you bring in the trivia question, I just want to make sure that folks be ready on the chat. This is the second trivia question that is coming along. And so, yeah, just wanted to take a moment to call out that to make sure that everybody is ready on the chat. And so, yeah, Lakshmi, if you are ready, you can go ahead with the second trivia question.
Sure. Okay. So here we go.
Okay.
Which MUnit tools assert event processor uses a set of data V functions to define the assertion conditions?
Can we just give few more seconds?
Sure.
But I think we have almost all the answers here, so definitely Okay.
Okay, so shall I go with the answer?
Let's go with the answer because I see all the options here. So, anyways, we have captured the
Sure.
answer.
The answer is assert that.
Yeah. And so,
Okay.
okay, yeah. So I see Mandy answered that. So, uh, yeah, Mandy, share your email. You can direct message to me. So are we ready with the third trivia question?
Yes, if
Are you
you.
ready on the chat? Uh, so I understand that a lot of you actually came up with the right answer, but as you know that we have to select somebody, so we are doing it on the basis of the first correct response of the chat. So be ready with your third. Be ready with the chat, and here you go on the third question.
All right. So here you go.
Okay.
Where should we configure the build to fail if the required code coverage is not met? In the test suite, in the test case, or in the pom.xml?
Okay, we'll give a few more seconds. I think we kind of have an unanimous answer here. Okay, let's go with the answer.
Answer is pom.xml.
Yeah. So I can see Vivian is the person to respond first. So Vivian, you are the winner of our third trivia question. So Vivian, if you can DM me your email address on the DM chat, that will be helpful. So I'd like to thank you everyone for participating on the trivia. I know a lot of you got the correct answer, but as I mentioned, we have to select one. And thank you for your responses. We are now going to use the last 8 minutes maybe to take some questions if you have. So please feel free to share your questions over the chat, or maybe if you want to unmute yourself and ask. So
Sure, Sergey. Thank you.
I'm just capturing the email address, so I may not be looking at the chat. Just give me 1 minute. I'll be right there. If there is any question, Lakshmi, are you able to look into chat?
I am checking the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just take a moment to. Is there any question?
Yes. Are there any limitation with connectors? So, like I said, if you're using if you want to use a HTTP connector, and if you're making if you're the configurations for initializing the connectors, the HTTP call should be you should specify. I had showed you right in the mock. There is an option called sorry, not in the mock, in the flow sources. There is an for the test case. There is an option in the flow sources where you have to specify the flow which contains initialization of the HTTP listener or the HTTP config. So that is the only thing you have to ensure that you specify in the flow sources. It's there in the documentation where if you're using a scheduler or if you're using a HTTP connector if you want to use a database in your test case, we have in Exchange a database that you can use in your MUnit test cases, a database server that you can locally use. It is available. You can add that to your palette, and then you can specify the database configuration and then initialize the database. Apart from that, I think you should be okay. But for your test cases, as much as possible, try to mock out your external dependencies. Like if you're using Salesforce or if you're using external database, try to mock them out. And you can actually mock. Dynamic data as well. I told you, right? So if you have, based on a certain condition, if you have multiple data that you want to check, you can have a for loop, and then you can have those mocked data in separate data view files, and then read that data view files depending on the certain condition. So you can mock it, mock the for each loop, and then you can call a flow which can have a choice router. You can pass the iteration counter of the for loop into that flow, and then depending on that you can pull the respective mocked data. So are there any limitations to mock connectors? No, Sergey, I think it should be okay. So I just mocked the Salesforce connector, right? So it should be fine, mocking. If you want to do dynamic mocking, if you want to mock multiple data depending on a specific parameter, then you need to add some configurations. But other than that, I don't think there are any limitations.
So Lakshmi, let me ask this question. If there is any, specific connector that we are using, so for example, NetSuite connector or let's say SAP connector, then is there any limitations in, how the MUnit would behave or the test recorder would behave?
I don't think there is any specific limitation for the test recorder. So if you want to mock any external connector, you can do that, Prasenjit. So it is basically a test recorder is going to capture the response that the SAP connector or the Salesforce connector is going to return back, and it is going to mock the data. So it's going to behave the same way wherever you're going to mock with any connector. But if you want to do some customizations to that, if you want to, like I said, if you want to dynamically mock different data based on a certain parameter, or if you want to, you want to call that, you want to have a database, you want to invoke a database as part of your test case. If you want to do that, if you don't want to mock it, in that case, we have facility, as far as I know, only for database and one more thing, I'm not able to recollect it, for database, an FTP server, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. We have an FTP server and a database server. So I'm not sure in that case for SAP, we have any facility to, connect to an SAP configuration as part of our MUnit test case.
Sure. Thank you, Lakshmi, for this wonderful session. I would really like to also appreciate all of you who have taken part of the Mulesoft meetup. If you would like to participate in our meetups, as I mentioned, please get in touch with me. If you want to present my email, I am actually putting the email in the chat, so that in case if you want to reach out, you can reach out. You can suggest topics. If you want to be a presenter, let me know. I'm happy to facilitate that. And thank you for your continued support for the Chicago Mulesoft meetups. I will see you in the next meetup. From this meeting onwards, from this, we are actually going to we are recording the session, so we will post the recording. I know some of you have asked this in the past, that can we get the recording, and I was not very sure about Mulesoft terms in terms of recording and distributing. but I think we have a consensus that we are allowed to record these sessions and post it in a public channel. So we'll do that. I see Madhava has a quick question. Could you suggest if there is if it is possible to save the test case for the future testing and share the test case with other team members? I think you can you have these test cases and test suite as a part of the code process, right? So you can check that in, and you can pretty much take it as a part of your version control system, right, Lakshmi?
Right. It is packaged as part of the build. So in the source test resources and the source test MUnit, you have it. Yeah. So you can check in the code in your source control and then share it with others. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So with that, I'd like to conclude. We are also at the top of the hour. So again, thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, everyone who participated, and see you in the next Chicago Mulesoft Meetup. Thank you.
Thank you.